Hi, this is World Series champion Aubrey Huff, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on the grueling Truth Network.
Hey guys, Graham and Chris back here with you. Once again, it is a fully loaded baseball show. We appreciate everybody for sticking with us last week. We had an absolutely fantastic interview, and a huge thanks to Adnan Virk from ESPN for joining us for a show that was not about baseball but was very powerful in its own right. And we hope to have something very similar on this show today, as we're going to have former big leaguer and World Series champion, two-time World Series champion Aubrey Huff joining the show. Chris, my man, what is going on? Been a busy week. How you been, brother?
Pretty good. You know, just trying to survive school and work and baseball starting on Monday. I'm getting really excited, and I promised everybody last week that this week's show was going to be about baseball, and it is. So, without any further ado, we're going to put the ball in play, and I want to tell you something that I think is really exciting, and that is the Los Angeles Dodgers re-signed Chase Utley. And why do I think that's really exciting? Because if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Los Angeles Dodgers picking up another second baseman who we said would probably do really well playing behind Chase Utley for a year or two, or even intermittently throughout the season with Chase Utley. And so now that they have that piece in place, I think that the Dodgers are going to have a pretty strong infield.
No doubt, man. I mean, and we discussed this really back when the Dodgers picked up Logan Forsythe from the Tampa Bay Rays, and I thought that Utley would be a good piece for Tampa Bay or for a team looking for a veteran piece. You know, I don't think he's going to be your everyday guy, which is fine. He's I think he's 38, 39. But, I mean, it's going to be around, an $8 million deal. He was rated by MLB Trade Rumors, give or take, about the 49th best free agent, which neither here nor there rating-wise. But, I mean, he's got a championship pedigree. He won a World Series with the Phillies. Has been, an all-star, will certainly be in the Hall of Fame conversation. I'm not going to say he's a surefire Hall of Famer, but I think he'll be on the ballot for multiple years once that time comes. But this is great now because as Adrian Gonzalez is getting a little bit older, Justin Turner's been re-signed, but he's going to, be doing a lot of work, a lot of hard work over there at third base. It's nice because now you can use Logan Forsythe, as we said a couple of weeks ago, as a kind of a utility guy when you need to give somebody a rest, and then you can insert a guy like Chase Utley into your lineup. Man, you can't make a better signing than that when you're trying to repeat as division champs in the National League West.
I couldn't agree more. And while we're on the subject of inserting guys into lineups to make teams better, there's another guy that I think is going to get inserted into a lineup here real quick to make a team better, and that's Mike Napoli, who left the Cleveland Indians. He's a free agent this year. We've all kind of wondered where he's going to go now that they picked up Edwin Encarnacion, and they don't really have a need for that huge bat anymore. But turns out the Texas Rangers might. And so Napoli's going to land in Texas. I think it's going to be good for Texas. I think it's going to be good for Mike Napoli because it's going to give him a place where he can go and he can be a designated hitter. He's not going to have to worry about playing first base every day. He might play first base some of the time. I doubt he's going to be the day-to-day guy. But it's going to give him an opportunity to be that guy that hits 250, that on base 350, that slugs 480, that's really going to boost the Texas Rangers and maybe keep them in contention with the Astros. But who knows?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're paying $8.5 million for a guy. Been around for a long time. He's a clubhouse guy. He's old. I hate to say old school when talking about the game, but we're going to get into some rule changes coming up here that you guys on social media have been absolutely up in arms over, and we really appreciate all the feedback we've gotten on our Twitter page at OO Left Field on Twitter, as well as on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham. Man, when it comes to to the infield, I mean, you got to expect that that probably Joey Gallo, is a guy that I think you're going to see try and at least get some type of touches over, at first base. They've got to figure out what he can do. I mean, are they going to end up keeping him? Are they going to trade him? There's been talk about it. We don't know. Josh Hamilton is coming back. Ryan Rua was there last year. Was decent, 258. We discussed him a couple of weeks ago. But I think the question is, can Josh Hamilton return to form? That's one of the big reasons you bring in Knapp, because you don't know what you're going to get from Hamilton. We know that at least in the last 3 or 4 years, he's been a shell of what he was during those 2011, 2012 type runs into the World Series and deep into the playoffs. But what are you going to get? So yeah, I think picking up Knapp is absolutely fantastic. It's going to be a big thing for them. And like I said, $8.5 million, isn't a big deal. But one of the guys that you and I had talked about that we thought would be a good piece, maybe for a team like Colorado or an extra arm somewhere maybe in Houston, was Jason Hamill. And just came down a day or two ago that the Kansas City Royals have decided they're going to add him. They signed him to a 2-year deal. There's a mutual option for the 2019 season. He's going to get about $16 million guaranteed, a buyout of $2 million, and he can earn up to $250,000 per season if he reaches 200 innings pitched, for each of those 2 years of his deal. I don't think it's a bad thing. Royals are obviously getting older. Their window is, I think, a sliver of what it was 2 years ago, and you don't have very long. There's no way you can keep Hosmer, Moustakas, and Salvador Perez. You got to pick your poison. I think you pick Sal when it's at that point because he's your field general, he's your catcher. And while Moose is probably, I think, the heartbeat of that team inside the locker room, Hosmer's young. He's got a bat. I think you focus on those two guys to hopefully take your franchise forward the next 5, 6, 7 years.
No, completely. And Jason Hamill's a great pickup, I think, for the Royals. Just as a guy who's gonna go into Kansas City and he's gonna do, I think, well. I'm not sure where they're gonna stick him, but we're talking about a guy who has, about 2.5 strikeouts per walk, and is striking out about 7 guys per 9 innings. His ERA is a little higher than we'd really like to see. He's a career 4.42 ERA guy. That's a little higher than you'd want to see in your starting rotation. But his 3.83 last season was, in terms of the American League, was not that bad. So I think that in 166 inning pitched last season, having a 3.83. It shows that he's still able to contend. He's still able to play well, and hopefully he can go into Kansas City this year and do something good for them too.
And let's not forget, and it's, again, the tragedy of the death of Yordano Ventura. The Royals needed to fill that hole, and they needed to fill it quickly. So they come up with a guy who's a veteran piece, should be a decent spot in that lineup. He's not going to have the same firepower that Ventura had, but he also isn't going to be that firebrand that was starting to grate on the front office of that Royals organization. So yeah, I think it's a really strong pickup for them.
So there's 3 more players that I want to talk about that made moves this week. 2 of them I'm somewhat excited about. One of them leaves me scratching my head. Let's go to the one that I'm pretty excited about, and that's Sergio Romo. We've made the joke a million times. Chris likes the Giants, we all know, but I like Sergio Romo, and I don't just like Sergio Romo because he played for the Giants. I like Sergio Romo because as a 7th or 8th inning pitcher, he's a good pitcher. I don't know that he's closer quality anymore. He was in 2012. He may not be anymore, but last year wasn't bad for him. We're talking about a guy who had a 2.64 ERA in 40 games, pitched 30 innings, was 4 for 4 in saves, and struck out 33 guys in 30 innings. So he's a good piece. He's a strong piece. His strikeout to walk is almost 5. His career strikeout to walk is over 5. He's not a hardball pitcher. He's a finesse pitcher. He throws that slider a lot, as you and I have discussed when we talked about him freezing up Miggy in the World Series in 2012.
The one fastball he threw that inning was that pitch that froze him on the inside corner. It was absolutely a beautiful pitch. And, I mean, as an umpire, a guy who, looks at pitching, I thought it was fantastic. And, umpires they're not there to anticipate, so you kind of just watch and see. And, again, it was a beautiful call by Brian O'Nora. And to your point, man, $3 million, that's nothing for a guy, it's a year, it's $3 million. And he said, I had bigger offers, but I want to play in LA. It's clear he didn't want to go back to San Francisco.
Right.
I think he knew his time there was done, and I'm sure. And there are some other things. I think he feels like he was being disrespected by fans, and I'm not going to get in his head. I'm not a shrink. Some guys tell you I'm barely an umpire, but $3 million for what he does or what he can do, what his resume shows, I think is fantastic. And he wants to obviously stay on the West Coast, and why not go to LA? The Padres aren't going to be worth to go to, or the A's.
Well, LA is home for him. He's from Los Angeles. He grew up a Dodgers fan. His dad's a Dodgers fan. He wanted to be a Dodger. He's always wanted to be a Dodger. So he's going home. And this is exactly the setup guy that Kenley Jansen needs. He is perfect in that role. And I think we'll see moving forward when the Dodgers are in close games, late in innings, that Romo's going to come in the eighth inning. He's going to get 3 quick outs. Kenley Jansen's going to come in and shut games. I think that's exactly how it's going to work, and I think he's going to do it very well.
I certainly think that the Dodgers are positioning themselves in the right spot. He knows, I think, at this point, like you said, that his closing days are behind him. But you have Melanson in San Francisco. You got Jansen is going to be in L.A. His days are numbered, and I'm not saying that in a rude way, but I mean he's on the tail end of his career. That's just Father Time is undefeated, so it makes sense he gets to stay where he wants to. He took a pay cut from other high offers, which shows you that at this point in his career he's pitching to pitch. He wants to play the game, and he knows that he's going to go where he wants because. Fortunately for him, he had the ability to do so because the Dodgers showed interest. A guy who really, and I think this is the one that you and I kind of had us scratching our heads at, and I'll touch on this quickly because the Twins DFA'd Byung-Ho Park, and he's a piece that came over from Korea a couple of years ago. Numbers are kind of odd. His last 3 or 4 years in Korea, he ended up being a high 300 hitter. 50 home runs. But as we discussed, when we were talking about guys coming over from, I think we were talking about not Urias, but for the life of me, the name escapes me of the other starter for the Dodgers. But how he comes over, and we have to do with Ichiro that Japan and that it's kind of like a double-A promotable to triple-A type of baseball. Right. Korea's not going to be even better than that. So you're signing a guy who had numbers that were like not video game numbers because you and I have talked and your video game numbers are just stupid. But regardless of that, he's got numbers that are fantastic. But I mean, you paid almost $13 million just a posting fee. Plus you're giving him just over $12 million for I think 4 years. He's due over 9.25 over the next 3 seasons. And you've got no freaking clue what this cat can do because he's playing in a league that is nothing talent-wise even remotely close to big league baseball.
Right. The problem with the Korean League is, like we did talk about, we actually talked about when we were talking about Ichiro and his hits total.
Right. That's right.
About Japanese baseball being like a double-A promotable, triple-A level. Well, if you consider Japanese baseball to be professional baseball, then Korean baseball is their double-A promotable, triple-A level. So now we're in high A, possibly even rookie ball level of play in Korea, and you got these guys coming over, and it plays out. I mean, he hit 345 in Korea. He comes over here and he hits 191, right?
Well, if Korea's like rookie ball, are they starting out the extra innings with runner on second? Oh wait, we'll get to that in just a second.
But 62 games, 215 at bats, 244 plate appearances. He walks 21 times. He strikes out 80 times. He hits 191. He did hit 12 dingers. So there's pop in the bat, but there's not the ability to hit the ball the way that a major league ball player needs to hit a ball.
There's no consistency is what you're saying. He's not consistently putting the ball in play.
But 41 hits in 215 at bats. This is not my head scratcher though. DFAing this guy is not a bad idea. I don't know.
No, I mean,
I don't know
who's
going to pick him up.
Yeah, there was really nobody that was going to pay that much money for a kid who you've got no legitimate results on. I mean, there was no question, I think, that he was going to clear waivers when they designated him.
Right. So that's not my head scratcher, though. To be honest with you, my head scratcher comes from Milwaukee, right? To the Yankees, and that's Chris Carter. And I've heard people over the last couple of days since this deal went down say that this is a good thing. This is a big deal. This is going to be good for the Yankees. And I step back and I look at who Chris Carter is and I go, what? Based on what? He's a career .218 hitter. He's barely hitting above the Mendoza line. The guy has struck out 875 times compared to 307 walks in his career. He's two and a half times.
Yeah, and he has two 200-plus strikeout seasons in 4 seasons where he's actually played a legitimate full season of big league ball.
In fact, last season he played 160 games and struck out 206 times, hit .222. His OPS, career OPS, is .777. I am not excited. Not only am I not excited, I don't understand where the excitement comes from with Yankees fans. I don't get it. I think this is a terrible move. I don't think he's going to give them anything. People are saying that this is a guy that can hit in front of or behind Gary Sanchez and make them pitch to Gary Sanchez. Absolutely not. You put this guy in the lineup behind Gary Sanchez, they're going to walk Gary Sanchez 100 times to get to this guy and 150 times on Sunday. It makes no sense to me. So
they don't have much right now in the way of a first baseman. Obviously, Tex retires. Come out now that he's going to be working as an analyst for ESPN. So congratulations to Mark Teixeira for that going into your new career. But they really don't have much in the way. And I mean, we discussed this. They still have Chase Headley at third, a much older Chase Headley. Sanchez is going to be the face of that franchise very, very soon, as long as he continues to do what he did last year. Ellsbury's getting older. They're looking to move Brett Gardner. Rob Refsnyder's a guy who he's been around. We'll see what happens. But yet they don't really have anybody that is comfortable, I think, or has been used to playing first. Greg Bird was there last year, but was there in 2015. Actually didn't play up in the bigs last year. So if to play devil's advocate here, I know what you're getting at. Certainly he is. I mean, he's never even come close to hitting 250. Okay, 239 is his highest, and that was in 2012, where he only played in 67 games. In games where he's played, a full season or at least 130 games roughly or more, his best is 227. So I totally get what you're saying. I don't see him as being a piece that's going to be a protective piece because he is a liability when it comes down to discipline at the plate. Okay, and you can't just he can't have a good game when you can't just go over and add some points to your discipline meter like you can in a video game. This guy is what he is. He's almost he's going to be 30 years old coming into this year. Actually, he's 30 years old now. Turned 30 on December 18th. So yeah, man, it doesn't make sense. 212, 182, 151, 206. That's the number of strikeouts per season the last 4 years. So there's really nothing there that I see as being protective. I get they're hoping maybe they catch lightning in the bottle. Maybe he has some kind of season where it just comes out of his shell and, oh my God, he was, we paid $3 million for him and we stole him but I don't see it. I think they still have a chance to contend, but the AL East is going to be one of the toughest divisions in baseball, along with the NL Central and I think the NL West. So, yeah, it's great if you want to drum it up, but I don't see it.
So I have a question for you, Graham. You remember when you and I argued about how bad the ownership of the Marlins is? Remember those conversations? We've had them 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
It sounds like we might be able to stop having that conversation.
We might, and we even had Josh Beckett on the show not too long back, a couple of weeks ago. I had a chance when I interviewed him over in Orlando, and he said, it's a good ownership. They want to win, but dear God, man, if they want to win, they have done a very poor job in making it happen. And it comes out now that there may be a handshake agreement in place for Jeffrey Loria to be selling the Miami Marlins. And I don't think that's an awful thing. Stories are coming out that New York real estate executive Charles Kushner is involved with, at least with one group. I'm sure, there are multiple in place. But my God, dude, he's making almost 10 times more than what he bought the team for. He's making $1.6 billion. At least that's the asking price. And he paid $158 million when he bought the team back in 2002. So first off, and this was mentioned the other day, I think on Russillo and Cannell when I was listening to ESPN Radio, and in something that Ryan Russillo said, and I understand this point, is at some point there has to be a drop-off of value. The value cannot continue in any sports league to grow exponentially the way that it is. And I don't care what you say, how much money that you put into a stadium and how much more money the city put in because you couldn't afford the whole thing. And now there is no way that team is worth $1.6 billion. They're not. I mean, I hate to say that they're a bottom feeder in the NL East, but they're going to be. They lost their best pitcher to a tragedy. Their biggest bat, we're not sure if he's going to come back the way that he was after his face literally exploded when he got hit by a fastball. So, I mean, you have so much money invested in things that there really isn't a whole lot to invest in.
So here's my problem, right? I should have seen this coming because this is classic sales strategy. What happened is this: how do you sell a team for 10 times what you pay for it? Well, there's sort of a formula for it. What you do is you buy the team, you increase their value by winning a championship, then dumping off players to gain sort of liquid funds. Then you build the team up again, have a couple of little issues with sell-offs, build the team until you convince the city that you're in that they should give you $13 million and that the county that you're in should give you $270 million, something like that. The Marlins only paid 155 out of 515 million that it cost to build that park. The rest was paid by Miami-Dade, with the exception of the $13 million that the city of Miami contributed. So now you have a ballpark that is state-of-the-art, under complete control of the owner.
It has fish tanks. It has fish tanks.
He makes revenue from everything that happens at that ballpark because it's his. These are not loans that the county and the city gave him. These were tax dollar contributions that they gave. So now you have this huge multi-million-dollar ballpark that you have a very small stake in and yet own all the rights to the revenue for. that right there could be worth $500 million. Oh, obviously it is. It costs $500 million to build. You add just the value of the ballpark at $500 million plus the value of the revenue possibilities coming in at probably another $250 million over the course of, a specific amount of time. I'd say probably 10 years, you could probably pull in $250 million in revenue in that park.
I think what you're saying.
It doesn't matter what the team does. In fact, having a low value on the team makes it more enticing for a guy to come in and say, hey, I can buy this team for $1.6 billion, which if it was a championship team might cost me $7 billion or $9 billion, and I can get this team relatively cheap. It includes the rights to the revenue of the ballpark, and then I can build that team, make it a championship team, and make even more money.
But my problem with that is Magic Johnson and the ownership group that bought the Los Angeles Dodgers, okay, regardless of your opinions as a fan, is one of the pillar teams of Major League Baseball. Agreed?
Sure.
$2 billion price tag.
Okay.
And they have a $6 billion TV agreement currently with Fox, over in California. I mean, that's next to nothing compared to what you get with Fox Sports in Florida. So when you're trying to charge, 5%? Is that right? Don't ask me math, but when you're charging close to the same amount for a team that has just not underperformed, just flat out not performed. But then a team like the Dodgers, who have this huge kind of aura about them, costs only, $600 million more? Come on. Come on.
So, but here's
it's
the thing,
crazy.
though. There's a value. I guarantee you that $1 billion of that price tag is the stadium. Because Dodger Stadium is old. But this stadium in Miami is brand new, and it's huge. And
but you also have all the land around Chavez Ravine as well that came with that price tag.
Yeah, but have you been to Chavez Ravine?
No.
It's a ravine. That land is not useful.
Thank you for your topographical map reading. The Army has served you well, Chris Murray.
It's pretty, but it's not. I mean, what are they going to do? Are they going to put a basketball stadium there, or a basketball? What do they call basketball arenas? No, that's not the kind of area that it is, And it's just like a lot of sports places. You go a block down the street, and it's not a great neighborhood.
So you say things. You say it doesn't look. It's not the most. It looks pretty. Okay. So I'm curious, kind of your opinion on this. What do you think the look is when in the Gulf Coast League and the other rookie ball league in minor league baseball starts putting a runner on second base to begin the 10th inning and every subsequent half inning beyond to try and make the extra inning game faster?
Well, listen. I have a thing that I can say about what that looks like, but it's not family friendly. So let's just
thank you for your self-control. Much
let's
obliged.
just say that there are so many better ways to speed up the game that don't involve ruining the game that I think any rational, commonsensical person could think of. In fact, this show has proffered an idea that would speed up the game that's probably 100 times, 1,000 times better than this idea.
And let me read to you what Joe Torre, who is the chief baseball officer of Major League Baseball, told Jeff Passan of Yahoo Sports. We've discussed Jeff multiple times, mainly about his take on relievers in the Hall of Fame, which neither here nor there. You can find all that stuff on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham, or at OO Left Field on Twitter for all of our shows and prior stuff like that, and as well as our YouTube videos. But Torrey said, quote, "Let's see what it looks like. It's not fun to watch when you go through your whole pitching staff and wind up bringing a utility infielder in to pitch. As much as it's nice to talk about being at an 18-inning game, it takes time. What really initiated it is sitting in the dugout in the 15th inning and realizing everybody is going to the plate trying to hit a home run, and everyone is trying to end the game themselves. I don't know what inning is the right inning, maybe the 11th or 12th inning, but there are a number of reasons," end quote. So I understand his idea here, and yeah, sure, extra inning games, it's maybe fun to be at as an umpire. They stink because we don't get a rest. You're out there every time. But like I said, a ton of you guys came back and gave us a ton of feedback. And as expected, most of it was absolutely, just abhorrent of what they were trying to do. But I want to, just give you a couple of things here that I liked. First, Frank Fiorino, a good friend of our show, loyal listener, love that he always comments on our stuff. He said, "Absolutely hate it. The more baseball tries to make the game more pleasing to the casual fan, the worse it gets. The beauty of baseball is in its tradition." And I get that. Tradition is a big piece. Bob Boehner, former umpire in the minor leagues, also works with the Ocean Umpire Training, the OUTS School, which is happening here in Cocoa Beach this weekend. You can check that out, OUTS on Facebook, OUTS, the Oceanside Umpire Training Seminar. Says, "I'm all for trying something out. No harm in testing it, but if it doesn't work, stop immediately." And I've got a bunch more here that we'll get to. I don't want to, run off a bunch of quotes right now, but here's the one that I want you to think, Chris, and I know that you want to jump in, but I want to kind of give you this because these guys kind of said the same thing, but they have different perspectives. I'm curious. Dave King said, "So they make a rule to speed up only 10% of all games and not speeding it up until after the 9th inning in a tie." Okay? He said, if you want to speed the game up, call a real strike zone. Don't let guys step out of the box between pitches. Watch how many, guys don't need to be readjusting their stuff. He has said a little more. And then Mike Warwick, very similar, said, "Oh my God, a change is being talked about that wouldn't be in Major League Baseball for years to come. And if it were to be implemented, would have no effect whatsoever on almost 93% of all games. Oh, good heavens, I won't even recognize the game anymore." So two similar trains of thought on what it means, but two different, theories on yes and no. So I know you don't like it, but and we've discussed ways to change this, but could you work something like this into the game and still keep the semblance of baseball, or do you just shut this idea down completely?
I shut this idea down completely. And here's the reason. So let's look at what both of those guys are saying. Every year, Major League Baseball plays 2,430 games. That's 162 games a season times 15 because two teams play at the same time, right? So 2,430 games are played between the months of April and September. Of those 2,430 games, the record for extra innings games is 210, less than 10% of games. So when I hear a guy say this is only going to affect less than 7% of games or less than 10% of games, we should just let them do whatever they're going to do, and it's not going to bother the other 93% of games or 91% of games or whatever. The problem is that some of the biggest, most important games are extra innings games.
Well, could you imagine starting the World Series with a runner on second? The World Series went 10 innings. Imagine that. Imagine
if you will. It's 2012? And it's the 16th inning of the game, and Brandon Belt crushes a walk-off shot in the 16th inning to win a playoff game. We're talking about a National League Division Series game. Had that situation started with a runner on second and everything else gone as it had gone the previous 6 innings, then the opposing team would have won that game in the 11th inning. There was a single and a double hit in that game. Didn't score the run, prevented the run from being scored, but just the single could have scored that runner at second base. Is that how we want to end important games? With a gimme run?
Right.
And
that's
if we do want to end games that way, then who do we charge that run to? Because the pitcher's not going to take it. He didn't put He didn't put that runner on base.
And someone actually said something very similar, is that if you're going to do that, then just basically it's like they got on him with an error. You don't give him the unearned run, but they also take. But then if that's the case, are you giving him the loss? Because what's almost more painful? Yeah, it's one run, but let's look at his win-loss record. He lost, man. This guy lost 35 more games. Oh, well, if you also look at this though, he was pitching in in extra innings 40 times with a runner on base, and that accounts for why he has a sub 500 winning percentage. Andrew Godfrey said something, and I liked this, and to me this is what really makes this kind of comes to the crux of the argument, and I think this is kind of what you're thinking, and you haven't quite said it in this way, but I think this goes really to the mentality that you have that we've discussed, is the home team would be at a disadvantage. If the road team scores a run in the top, the home team has to score twice in the bottom. At best, you can tie it with one runner on, but then you continue the same situation back and forth. So, Andrew, I think I never had really looked at it that way, but I think it was a fantastic way that you kind of explained that, because, yeah, when you think about it, well, man, yeah, it's true. If my team does that, well, yeah, we're up by one, but now we got to score two. I think it makes perfect sense. Right. Thomas Karakani said, both teams, while playing extra innings, are subjected to the same aches and pains of pitcher team fatigue in the late night innings. I say hell no. My only thing is as an umpire, and I get this idea from guys, is the umpire needs to be as focused as he can be the entire game. It's going to be hard when you're 4, 5, 6 hours into a 17, 18 inning. You're basically playing 2 games in one night, and you're calling almost 1,000 pitches to not have a mental slip at that point. I'm not saying that that we don't make this rule change because umpires can't handle it. I'm not saying that at all. But I also understand, and most umpires that did respond to this actually were more in favor. So let me go through a couple more things real quick. Greg Joseph Jr. said this is stupid. Baseball is historically, quote, boring. Trying to draw interest to the sport isn't helping it. Greg, I respectfully disagree 100%. I get if you think baseball is boring, but baseball, the beauty of the game is it's a game of anticipation. It's kind of trying to prepare for what's going to happen. I get it's not as active as what you're going to get in basketball, but in football we're playing a 60-minute game with about 13 minutes of actual play. An average play lasts about 10 seconds at that. So I disagree. Mark G. Elliott says, dumb idea. If they want to speed up the game, cut out all the pitching changes. Give the manager 2 pitching changes per game during an inning, except in the playoffs. I don't know how many times I have seen managers act like it was the 7th game of the World Series when their team was 25 games out. I agree. And the harder part of that is obviously with the expansion of rosters, which we discussed also, is if you want to do it, great, but it sucks to do it at the tail end of the year because then it gives some teams maybe, it can hurt guys who are trying to make a playoff race. But this goes to your point, brother, is that I'm not saying, 2 pitching changes per inning, but I think at least forcing a pitcher to face a minimum of 2 or 3 batters. If you get into one of those horrific innings and you can't find an out, I get it, but I think that's something that, like you said, that you mentioned, Buster Olney agreed. Actually, that was one of the things we were excited about, was that he agreed and took that to Rob Manfred when he discussed it, is that, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Rick Cleveland says only if you put the runner on first with one out, or I'm sorry, only if you put the runner on with one out. Even with that added, I dislike the idea. I get that because it looks on first, then you got a chance for double play, right? I mean, it kind of works, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, at least you're mitigating some of that. But here's my thing. So he's talking about, Joe Torre's talking about, well, nobody wants to sit and watch a game go 18 innings, right? I mean, 18 innings, how many games have gone 18 innings? If you had to just throw a guess out there, how many 18-inning games have there been?
I can't give you a number, but I can say, if I recall correctly, I think there were 2 or 3 last year that actually ended up getting into the 15th or 16th, and we had one that went to the 19th, I believe. I don't quite remember, but do you have the number in front of you for total games past that point by chance?
No, I just want you to throw a number out there. If you had to think about it, how many innings would you say? How many games would you say go to 18 innings?
I got to think there's probably less than 50 all time. I mean, that's a long night. I can't imagine that there's a lot of those.
I would agree. In fact, the longest game in postseason history is the 2014 Nationals Giants NLDS, the marathon game that I was talking about. It happened in 2014, where Brandon Belt hits the home run to end it in the 18th inning. It's the longest game in postseason history. Now, the longest game in baseball history is 33 innings, but to be fair, that happened in 1981 in AAA. So we're not talking about something that happens regularly. In fact, I would venture to guess that less than 70 or less than 20% of extra innings games go past the 11th inning.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't. I'd say it's about that. I mean, a decent amount are going to end up being in the 12 or something like that. I don't think it's going to get too crazy, but I understand that they want to try something new, but big picture, I'm not a fan.
So some people are fans, and listen, I am not here to tell anybody that they're right or wrong in their opinion. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. If you want to go on the internet and put your opinion out there and be completely wrong about it, especially in this situation, if you like this rule change, that is completely up to you. But
and guys
like Craig,
I understand Chris does that on the show every week, so it's okay.
But guys like Craig Dupree, who says, well, for them, the alternative seems to be playing all night long. If that's what it takes for the game to get finished. And while the players get to go sit in the dugout, the umpires get to stand around. Sounds like a winner to me. I disagree. Listen, I get it. Umpires get tired. Having a tired umpire in the 18th inning can be the beginnings of a bad situation if it's a close call at the plate. But this isn't 10 years ago.
Right. Well, and we saw that about 4 or 5 years ago in Atlanta. It was Pittsburgh and Atlanta, and Jerry. Yeah, and Jerry Meals. It was just one of those games where, it's hard to tell, but it looks like maybe he missed a play at the plate that ended up being a walk-off for Atlanta.
Right. But if that happened today, that play would get reviewed and the right call would be made, as best as the replay capability can make the
very, very, very true. And that is a big point, is that replay gets involved here. So, that is a, while granted balls and strikes aren't reviewable, when it comes down to it, it's going to be those judgment calls at first base on the base pass. So that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
So I get it that umpires are tired and players get to sit down, but players are more physically active umpires not as physically active, so there's a trade-off there. But, I agree with you and most of our listeners when they say they don't like this rule change. But I do want to read two more guys that agree with the rule change and see what you think about what they said. Brenton Joseph Ham says, I don't always like the rule changes proposed, but actually kind of like this one. It will make things more interesting, that's for sure. Richard Reynolds says, yes, do whatever to move this dinosaur of a sport out of the 19th century. I would venture to guess that Richard Reynolds is not a baseball fan or a baseball super fan. So
yeah, that one goes a little bit beyond for me.
I'm going to I'm just going to personally completely discount that comment. Richard, thank you for commenting. But if you think baseball is a dinosaur sport, watch football. But Brenton, your statement does make some sense. It will make things interesting for the visiting team, because it's interesting that they can now bunt a runner over, hit a single, or even bunt down the first baseline and put the home team in such a disadvantage that you've basically removed home field advantage from the entire equation.
Right. And let's not forget now, there are two more things. And this one actually, Jason Stark has reported that this is, that the proposal has been formally made to the MLBPA. But the rule changes that we discussed last year when we began the show, which is about raising the lower part of the zone from basically the hollow beneath the kneecap to the top of the knee. That's the official wording in the rule book, is the hollow beneath the kneecap. And then also that managers can signal that they want to intentionally walk a player, just hold up four fingers or whatever it is, instead of actually having to throw the pitches. Now, you and I both agree that the time that you're going to save by eliminating four tosses to home plate is negligible. It has absolutely no bearing. And if you turn a game because you got to watch a pitcher, throw four tosses to home plate, I'm sorry, I can't help you. But we've also seen there's plenty of YouTube videos. There's a ton of stuff where you throw that toss a little bit too close to the plate and it gets hit, or it gets jacked somewhere and something happens because of it, or you get a wild pitch.
Overthrow.
I get that. Right, I get a lot of those things. Yeah, the wild pitch, and I get those things don't happen often, but it happens enough, and that's the beauty of the game, that you don't take that away, and you're not saving anything by it. You're dumbing it down to what happens in the National Federation of High School rule book, which is just call time and signal, and I don't want that. Throw your four, move on. There are so many better ways to make the game move along at a better pace than by eliminating the intentional walk.
Right. And the thing is that people don't issue enough intentional walks to make this make sense. Because look at the top pitchers in the league. These are guys who have issued 5, 6 intentional walks in their careers. Some of these guys issue an intentional walk a season. These are not guys who, this is not something that happens in every single game. In fact, it probably doesn't even happen every single day of the baseball season. So when you're talking about just giving free passes by holding up four fingers, you're removing an element of the game that can actually make things exciting, as we've seen overthrows on intentional walks and guys coming in from third base, hauling butt, trying to get down the line to score because a pitcher makes a mistake, or in the case of Miguel Cabrera again, who they toss one a little bit too close for him and he jacks it out into right center and scores a run, right? These things happen. But if you take that away, now you're not giving any incentive to even consider a heavy lead on third base in case that ball goes by. It's taking too much away from the game. We've discussed this rule change previously. We've discussed both of these rule changes previously when we were discussing what we would change in the game of baseball. So I don't want to get too bogged down in the discussion of the change of the strike zone, the change of the intentional walk.
The one thing I will say actually is they are the MLBPA is weighing both of these changes for this season. And Jason Stark did report that the intentional walk elimination is more likely of these two to be approved for 2017. Obviously, he said it's more of a cosmetic thing. The strike zone is altering gameplay, and umpires have been used to calling the ball below the knee, and pitchers have been used to dotting that part of the zone. I hope that this doesn't get approved. I wish anything that you would try it lower. I think this isn't a big deal, but it does, and it's not changing the fabric of the game, as we've said, but it is a piece that I think it's a negligible change that doesn't have a lot of bearing on the season.
So I want to tell you a story, Graham. It's story time a little bit. As you know, and as you've ruthlessly pointed out on hundreds of occasions on this show, I'm a Giants fan. And as a Giants fan, I have watched the Giants go to 5 World Series now, win 3 of them, lose 2 of them, and the first one of those was in 1989. The next one was in 2002, both devastating losses, especially the 2002. They won 7 games. They had it won and gave it up. So I'm going to tell you a story about 2010. And in 2010, I had just gotten home from Iraq, and I had been following the season not as carefully as I wanted to, but obviously I was in Iraq, so it's a little hard to follow the season there. But I was following it as carefully as I could. I understood that the Giants were doing well. I understood that they were really racing toward a playoff berth. And then I had the opportunity to watch them play and watch them beat the Braves in the division series, and then move on into the championship series and win that. And I watched them go to the World Series, and I was worried, as I think any Giants fan was, that this is going to be a replay of the 2002 World Series, where we all got so excited and we were so ready for this to happen, because that was a really good Texas Rangers team that they were facing that year. And I was sitting on my couch in my apartment in Tacoma, Washington.
Were you holding your Ahmed doll that I got you while you were overseas? Just so everyone knows that story, that there is a talking Ahmed the Dead Terrorist doll from Jeff Dunham holding your wedding picture.
Yes. I was not holding the doll, but there is a Ahmed the Dead Terrorist doll in my house. But I was watching Game 4 of this World Series, which to that point had been a really good World Series. And I sat almost with my jaw on the floor as I watched Aubrey Huff jack a 2-run shot to win that Game 4. Now, that's not the series-ending game, but it is an exciting end to a World Series game. And so as a fan of the Giants, as a fan of baseball, and as a person who has experienced many of the things that we're going to get into discussing with Aubrey Huff, I am so excited that after this commercial break, we're going to come back on with Aubrey Huff.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting conversation. We're going to get into some things. He has a new book out called Baseball Junkie. We're going to get into a little bit of dark topics, some things in his life that went a little bit outside of baseball, but we're also going to have a little bit of some baseball talk. So, guys, hang with us. We'll be right back after these words from the Craft Beer Club with 2-time World Series champion, Aubrey Huff.
Okay, let's get right to it. Do you want an easy gift idea good all year round? Or maybe you just like to keep a steady supply of quality crafted microbrews delivered directly to your door. Either way, The Grueling Truth has a solution for you. Go to thegruelingtruth.net/beer to learn how you can join up with the Craft Beer Club and get the best American beers you've never heard of sent direct to you or that beer drinker on your gift list. The Craft Beer Club discovers exceptional craft brews from around the country and delivers them direct to you or your gift recipient. Every selection is produced by independent microbrewers employing traditional ingredients and time-honored brewing methods. Best of all, with the Craft Beer Club, there is no membership fee, no obligation, and any subscription may be canceled at any time. Choose from monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly to get the right amount of great beer to stock your fridge or someone else's. So help the grueling truth help you to fantastic beer year-round. Visit thegruelingtruth.net/beer and join the club, the Craft Beer Club.
U.S. delivery addresses only. Please enjoy Craft Beer Club products responsibly.
Hey, guys, welcome back. Happy to have World Series champion Aubrey Huff with us here joining on the show today. Aubrey, great to have you with us. I know Chris is absolutely geeking out over there, but it is awesome to have you with us, and just want to say thank you very much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure, guys.
So the big reason that we wanted to pull you on, besides, you had a fantastic career. You started in Tampa Bay, which is kind of as close to my backyard as it gets. Obviously, won 2 World Series titles with the San Francisco Giants, but you have a book that I believe has just been released. Everything that I've seen is it is solely at this point on Amazon.com, called Baseball Junkie, and it is kind of a double entendre in the name for guys who absolutely love the game, but then there's a lot more history behind this book, and as much as we love talking about baseball on the show, we also really enjoy kind of getting into things that go beyond just what happens in between those white lines. So I'd like to take you just a few minutes and tell us just kind of what brought you about wanting to write this book, and a lot of what was kind of the driving force to make you want to do this.
Well, I wanted to write it because I'd struggled mightily in my career with a dependence on Adderall towards the last 3 seasons of my career, from 2009, spanning from 2009 to 2012. It started when I was with the Orioles and carried its way into a quick stint with the Tigers and into my final 2.5 years there with the Giants. And so what it did to me was I am completely convinced that you'll read in the book, if you're so inclined to read it, that I was one of those guys that just loved playing baseball for the longest time. And years of losing in the Tampa Bay Rays system over the years. I spent 6 years in Tampa Bay, 3 years in Baltimore, dead last in the American League East. And I'd grown to just hate baseball, just getting my butt kicked every year. And along came this little magic pill called Adderall in 2009. I was introduced to it in Baltimore. The minute I took it, I was hooked instantly. It was one of those feelings that, I've never been a drug guy. I've always, for me, had a few beers here now and then, but never been a drug guy. And I took this pill, and it made me feel like I was on top of the world. I was God. I could not be touched. I could not be hurt. I was fearless. I felt like a superhero. I really did. Invincible, if you will. And I knew the minute I took it, I would take it the rest of my life. It was that addicted to me instantly. And for 3 years, I went on that path. But the one thing I found out about it was I had a hell of a time sleeping. I could not fall asleep at night. And the only way I could fall asleep at night is if I drank about 15 beers and passed out. The next morning, I woke up hopeless, miserable, depressed. It was one of the most worthless feelings every day for 3 years straight. When I woke up, the only way I can make it go away was take another pill. And so the vicious cycle began. And I knew that it was bad for me, but I could not care less about how good this made me feel on the baseball field. And so in my retirement, I almost lost my family. My wife was divorcing me. I'm happy to report we're together now with both our children. And I was blessed to get it back, but it almost cost me everything. I was suicidal in my closet. I was suffering through massive panic attacks, depression out of baseball. And I'm completely convinced that getting off the Adderall was what did it for me. There's just no way that you can reproduce that dopamine level that you get in your head when you take this pill. And when I got off it, I couldn't replace it. And that took me into a downward spiral, and it almost cost me my life and my family.
Aubrey, one question that I've been planning to ask you since I heard that we were going to have you on the show and since I started reading about what this book was about. was something that a lot of people will say, or that I hear a lot, is that people are really surprised when they hear that, especially athletes or movie stars, things like that, people who do something, especially athletes who are doing something that they are supposedly love to do and are getting paid well to do it. People are surprised that they have these struggles with depression and anxiety. And my question for you is, do you think that sort of bias makes it more difficult for guys like you to get help when they need it? Like, is it something that maybe makes you feel like, well, I don't want the world to know this because they're going to judge me based on the fact that I'm supposed to be this way and I'm not?
Well, that's a great question, and I tell people this all the time. And I even mentioned in my book, I mean, as a professional athlete, we are trained to go out there every day with the killer instinct, show no signs of fear, no signs of any kind of weakness to the other team. And the minute that you go out there and say that you're struggling with anxiety or depression, you're dead. You're absolutely dead. Now, don't get me wrong. When I was on Adderall, I didn't have anxiety. I didn't have depression. I was the happiest, most go-lucky. I just enjoyed life. It's impossible not to love life on Adderall. Matter of fact, the first time I took it, I thought to myself, if everybody on this planet was on this stuff, the world would be a better place. I really thought that. But the downs of Adderall it was way worse than the high. But you just keep chasing that high to get rid of those downs. And so, the weakness, like you said, you're just shown on the field. You cannot show any of that stuff. So for me, you don't, as an athlete, you don't want to ask for help. You don't want to let any of your teammates in on it. You don't want to let your family in on it. You're basically on an island all by yourself. And, for somebody that's suffering from addiction, anxiety, depression, that's the worst possible thing you can do is keep it to yourself, because then you're isolating yourself and you're alone. You think you're the only one going through it. Believe me, when I was going through my especially anxiety and depression, I thought I was the only person in the world going through it. And, as I've come out of this on top and done so many studies on the subject, millions of people around the world, are going through the same thing. So if there's people out there listening to this, you're not alone.
Well, and it's amazing for me to listen to you say that and listen to you talk about that, because myself personally, I'm a combat veteran. I served in Iraq in 2009, 2010. And
thank you for your service.
Thank you. And since I've been home, I've struggled with these problems. I've struggled with depression. I've struggled with the PTSD. And it's inspiring to me to hear. I mean, it saddens me, obviously, to hear that the situation is the same for athletes, that they feel like they can't get help because it's a sign of weakness. That's exactly the same way that veterans feel. And I really feel that hearing that, like if veterans read your book, veterans who are suffering from these problems, the substance abuse and the PTSD and that sort of thing, read that and understood that it's not just veterans that feel that way. And, here are these high-paid, high-power athletes that feel exactly the same way. That could help them as well.
You know what? It's unbelievable you asked that question, because that's the heart of one of the biggest people I get so many responses from is from veterans, people coming back from just unbelievable hell and wherever they're being deployed from, and we're not too far different, yet we are, as baseball players and veterans. I'm not even going to sit here and say that we're heroes. We're not. We're athletes, and we're paid ridiculous amounts of money to play a kid's game, and you're going out there and you're risking your life, bullets whizzing by you for our country. Completely different. But the things that we do share in common is that adrenaline rush, that camaraderie, right? You're going out there and you have this adrenaline on the field. You have this adrenaline out there on the war field, and you have these band of brothers with you, whether it be 24 other guys on your major league roster, or you have your infantry with you, they're out that's battling with you. You have these brothers that are family, and you all of a sudden you're thrust when you retire into this world that you have no clue how to adjust to. You know how it is. When you're with your unit, you're jackassing around, you're having a great time. you're just messing with each other, you're ragging on each other, but it's all in good fun, right? You do that in the real world, people don't get it. People are too uptight. It's unbelievable. So now you get into this real world situation, and you have these guy moments that only guys understand in the Army or baseball or sports, whatever. People are soft in the real world, man. It's unbelievable how sensitive people can be. And so it's hard to transition to that. And so what happens to us is we feel like we have to adjust to them, and that's not our personality. And we just go into this deep, dark, depressing hole. And so in a lot of ways we share the same common problems when we get out of whether it be Army, Air Force, Navy, whatever, and professional athletes, whether it be NFL, basketball, baseball. It's the same thing. The adrenaline, the camaraderie, that's what we miss.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I mean, there are a lot of similarities there. And I appreciate you obviously pointing out the differences because there are differences. But
Absolutely.
that idea that you can't really get back to that sort of camaraderie really anywhere else. And I know as a ball player myself, obviously not at the major league level or even really far into the collegiate level, but as a ball player myself, I know how attached you can get to guys on your team. And I know how close you guys get. And of course, being in the military, that much more just the same sort of idea. And it is really hard coming back from that. So I guess my last question before I let Graham sort of kind of jump into the questions that he had for you. My last question is, when you were on the road to recovery, after you hit your lowest point, and I always ask people this when I'm discussing, because I work for a nonprofit organization that trains service dogs for veterans with PTSD. And so I talk to a lot of people about PTSD and depression. But I always ask them this one question, is that when you were on your road to recovery and you were coming back, what was the thing that you found to cling on to that brought you out of that hole?
Well, I mean, I was literally 2.5 years ago in my closet with a gun to my head, staring at myself in the mirror. I had a .357 Magnum in my head. I had the hammer back. I was looking at myself with a white beater on, shaved head, goatee, tatted up down my arms. I looked like a badass, but deep down inside I was scared to death. And I was pretending to be someone I wasn't my whole life. And I'd hit rock bottom. And they say when you hit rock bottom is when you've hit the palm of God's hand. And for me, growing up in Texas as a young man, I grew up in that Bible Belt, and I'd gotten away from my faith for the longest time. And in that moment, I eased the hammer back, put the gun down on the floor, and I prayed. And I prayed for forgiveness, and I prayed for peace in my life, and I prayed for God to be a part of my life again, and I prayed for His will in my life. And I walked out of that closet, and I'm not going to say it happened overnight, but it took about 2 years to really get back to where I was normal again. And, in this world of instant results and everybody wants a quick fix, I've talked to so many people. I've talked to kids at schools and, college kids and, people today with anxiety, depression, addictions. They want everything done now. And when I tell them, and I'm upfront with them, hey, it took me about 2 years to get back right, they don't want to hear that. But that's exactly what happened to me. And I think sometimes God's got to break you down to build you back up. And I had to be broken down big time because I was a cocky, self-righteous, womanizing piece of crap for a long time. And I had to be broken down so that I can be the person I am today. And, when I was going through all the crap, I cursed God. Why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? I look back at it now, though, and I feel blessed that I went through it. And I pray that people out there that are going through what they're going through now, you can't do this on your own. There's got to be a greater purpose, whether you believe in God or not. You got to look beyond yourself and find some kind of faith. And for me, my faith in Jesus Christ helped me through it.
The funny thing is, Chris pretty much took my question, I think, without knowing I was going to ask you, because one of the things that you mentioned is that you rewired your mind for positive change, and I wanted to ask how. And I love your answer because last week we actually, for our show, we had Adnan Virk from ESPN on, and he is a a man of devout Muslim faith, and obviously there's been a lot of darkness in the world. So it's one of the beauties that we love about our show is, that we don't mind going away from baseball sometimes. And, how much similarities there are between us. Because we're here with Aubrey Huff, World Series champion, former Major League player. Something Tim Kirkjian wrote about your book. I read this, and I already know I want to read it, but I love the way he put it. He said, Aubrey Huff has written an honest, disturbing, courageous, inspiring book that goes well beyond baseball. It addresses life challenges, including addiction, depression, and suicide. I've always said baseball is the hardest game to play. Huffy's story takes that to another level. So, guys, again, you can go on Amazon.com to find the book. It's called Baseball Junkie. It's an absolute it's an honor for us to have you on. We say it to everybody, but this is a great story. And before we let you go, I want to ask you one baseball question that just came about, and our social media pages has absolutely exploded with the reaction to this. I don't know how much you followed, but there just came out really within the last 24 to 48 hours that Major League Baseball is going to institute a test in rookie ball where an extra inning game begins when you get in the 10th inning and beyond, that a runner will automatically be put on second base, making the international tiebreaker a part of rookie ball. I'm just curious, as a former player, and I know you've played in your share of extra inning games, but what is your thought when you hear that?
It's absolute nonsense. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Baseball is allegedly America's pastime, and I'm an old school player, and I've always been that way. I'm not too much. When I played, I was not into social media. I'm more into it now because of my book. I have to be, but I hate social media. I hate everything it stands for, and I see so many young guys in baseball doing it, and the game's changing in such a way, and in a way, if you don't adapt the game, you're gonna be left behind. And I'm so glad I retired when I did, because it's just gotten out of control. You're talking about instant replays with cameras, and I know technology is amazing nowadays, but you're losing the human element of the game. You're losing the umpires are going to be irrelevant. You're going to have electronic strike zones. You're going to have beeps when somebody's out at first. You're just going to it's going to get to a point where is the human error in this game? Whether it be in NFL or baseball or hockey, whatever, basketball. Are you serious? Let's just say we won the 2010 World Series by one in the division, National League West. We won it by one game. And what if it came down to that one game, because we had a new rule put into place where the Padres can put a runner at second base, they score instantly, game over, right? That whole 162 games, the 40-plus games we have in spring training, is all for naught because of a stupid rule that wasn't put in place. America's pastime, baseball, is historic, man. You're going back Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth, all these old school guys, man. It's historic, and now you're throwing all this technology into it. It makes me cringe. I'm sorry. I'm a baseball purist. I can't stand it. I hate all the WAR, the stats, all these shows on ESPN that have all the different stats. Whatever happened to just average home runs and RBIs and runs scored, right? I still don't even know what even – I don't know what
you're on a show of baseball purists.
And as an umpire, I cannot help but be happy to say, we need the human element. So thank you. Yes, keep the umpire in the game. As much as everybody hates what we do, it's a necessary evil. So, guys, you can follow Aubrey Huff on Twitter at Aubrey_Huff. Thank you so much for joining us. Please go get this book, Baseball Junkie. You can find it on Amazon.com. It is an excellent story. There is so much behind it, way more than just baseball. If you love the game, or if you know someone, even more importantly, who is going through a time like this, and you have someone here that can read a book about a game that touches more than life, this is a great way to help do that.
And Aubrey, before we let you go, I just wanted to say that I am grateful that you made it through this, and that you're back from it now, and you're healing, and you're on that road to recovery, and that you could take the time out of your day to come on here and talk with us.
Well, gentlemen, it's my pleasure. God bless you both. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Aubrey. And our immense thanks to Aubrey Huff for joining us. Guys, please go check out Amazon.com for his book, Baseball Junkie. It is worth the read. I am absolutely ecstatic to read it. It's not very long, Chris. There's no pictures in it, but I still think that you'll be able to get through it and enjoy. And plus, it's a Giants guy, so yeah, I think you'll read it anyway.
I'm pretty sure that I'm an English major, and I have a degree in English, so I do read books occasionally.
That means nothing here, sir.
Guys, Mr. Huff, Graham, it's been a great show. It's been another great week for baseball. I can't wait until next week because just like this week, I'm sure we're going to find things that come to us straight out of left field.